But I think at some point that person should be able to pause. And I'm just saying, when I say pause, just sit in a space without any distractions. A park in your room, no vaping. Just sit there for a minute and say to yourself, what are the results of me doing this? Yes, feel good. It relaxes me, all those other answers that someone may give. But what are the negative results that were given? If a person can sit and ask themselves that question and then come up with that answer, that will be the beginning stages of at least putting into their mind, yeah, this right here is not good because it's impacting my health.
Yeah. What's up, boys? Welcome back with another video. Today I get a chance to interview Mr. Derrick McCollum. And Mr. McCollum is a marriage and family therapist based out of Atlanta, Georgia. He also provides therapy for men who have had adverse childhood trauma, and he served in the Marine Corps as a police officer and as a detective in the DEA. Today, we talked about his experience with childhood trauma and addiction and how one would go about battling their own struggles in life. If you like today's video, like the video, and let us know about other discussions you'd like to hear in the future. We're also giving away some truth merch and other items, so please fill out the Google form in the description below. Thanks, and have a good one.
So I grew up in Philly in the projects, and so I'm a projects guy. The projects back then, they were high-rise projects, that 35 floors and the elevator doesn't work. You got to walk the stairs in the summertime. Food stamps were paper and they were different colors. And so, so it was, honestly, it was an experience that was important to my growth and development, but I didn't know it at the time. So from the age up until the age of 7 years old, my household was good. Dad and mom married, older brother, younger sister. And something happened. I didn't know what the something was until I got older. But all of a sudden, my father, he became angry and he became abusive to my mom. And I witnessed that. And so I was confused. But then all of a sudden, he went on my brother. And then, of course, me. And so I grew up from the age of 7 in an abusive environment, physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. Not my sister. She was the baby girl, so she was the one that was protected. Yeah. So growing up in that environment, to me, the friends that I had, it was common because that was the norm. All my best friends, their dads were either not in their lives or they grew up in a very abusive environment. And so I didn't think nothing of it. I didn't think of it as any type of adverse trauma, but it did impact me. So, I was told that I was dumb and I was stupid. I played sports. I
think you went on mute.
I was a three-person sport. So I played football, basketball, and baseball, and I thrived in it. And so when I did a rush for 100 and something yards, or caught the game-winning catch, and I came home, my dad said, "You'll never be a athlete. You'll never be a sports figure." So I grew up in that environment where my identity was being shaped and I didn't know it. And so my childhood started out in a very good way, but then as I got to between 7 and the time I left, 18 years old, it was very, very, very toxic. So that was my childhood, and the trauma, I didn't realize until I left and I became older that was trauma.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man. Wow. And that leads perfectly into our next set throughout your career, you've had several roles. You're in the Marine Corps, you're a police officer, and now you currently serve as a therapist. Some of these roles were both physically and mentally demanding. What led you to these avenues, and what kind of connects them all for you? And can you talk about eventually how you found yourself practicing as a therapist?
I think that because I grew up in a home, my family were blue collar workers. My family you were going to the military or you're going to be a cop. So education on that side of the family was not emphasized. So I knew that I was going to be working with my hands. I knew that that was the role. So I think it was part of it was a healthy motivation because I saw the success in the men in my life who were cops and who were in the military. So I watched them. So it was healthy experience. I wouldn't say it was anything unhealthy that motivated me. I was glad when I turned 18 years old when the recruiter in the Marine Corps came to my school and he had the dress blue uniforms on and he came to my school and I said, "You don't have to tell me anything. I'm gone." Recruiters try to persuade you and to kind of, I said, "You ain't got to do none of that. I turned 18 June 11th. When is the earliest that I can go?" I think it was a healthy, motivating experience to go into the military. It was the best experience of my life. It was a healthy experience to get into law enforcement. I wouldn't change it at that time for the world. I think God knew, now we're in 2021, that me as a Black man in law enforcement, that wasn't going to work for me. So God prevented me from being in law enforcement now, because so it was a good experience, good motivating experience. And I think because I've always wanted to know why people did what they do, or what made things work. Like I remember my dad, we had, back then it was the component sets. It was the TV and the record player on top. It was this big giant component set and the bubble was in the back, the bubble TV we call it. And I was always intrigued about what's in the back of this TV, what's in this bubble. And so one day I took the screws off and I opened it up and it's like, man, look at this thing here. Of course, my dad came home and you don't have time for me to tell you that story. You can imagine what happened with that. But
that was a good one.
Yeah, no, he responded to me accordingly. But I was always intrigued about what made things work. And so as I got older into the Marine Corps and experienced the things that I experienced and then going into law enforcement, I was always curious, why did you do that? My arrests were not traffic violations. My arrests were more responding to drug cases, and that's how I became a detective, because I wanted to know why. And my arrests were very low because I did more talking. What made you do that? I work with the gangs, the environment. So I was always curious on that level of counseling. And so, when I met my wife, she was a therapist. And so when we married, I joined her in her practice in marriage counseling. And when I did my first session, I realized that this is the place for me, because I can hear someone's story and then understand why. And so I think those experiences led me to counseling and to get into this practice that I'm in today.
Wow. Well, you've actually talked about your dad quite a bit. I know this is off script, but can you talk about more of maybe the impact he's had on your development? I know you said you had some traumatic experiences. Were you ever trying to win your dad over, I guess, as a child, trying to impress him? So like from a loving father perspective.
Oh man, you're pulling on the heartstrings now, man. I didn't.
I'm sorry.
You went off script with this one, but it's good though. I'm glad that you asked that question, because no apology, because I'm men. I'll speak for myself. Very rarely I have the opportunity to say my motivation or trying to get his attention or those kind of behaviors. Sometimes when I share the story, it's all about that he was this dude that was mean. He wasn't a mean guy. He was a product of his environment. His dad abused him and died at 12 years old. His dad was an alcoholic. His father, my grandfather, who I never met, my great-grandfather never met, his dad did the same thing. So it was a generational cycle. And I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I did want to get a sense of approval and attention, and he did give those things to me from time to time, but he was dealing with his own demons. And so, yes, I did want to share with him some of my experiences and my feelings and my thoughts. But he was a man who was raising his boys in the '60s, and he says to me, as he got older in age, and he's passed now, but he said that I just was trying to raise men, and that's how he knew how to raise men. And so when he said that to me, I said, I got it. It makes sense. I'm good with you now. Yeah. So yeah, I did, chase after my father. Yeah.
Man. Okay. Well, now we're talking a lot about men now. You've helped personally hundreds of men who've needed guidance as they navigate life. What are some of the struggles that you see every day in your practice that men deal with every day? And what effect does their environment have on these struggles?
That question is such a broad question, and men deal with a lot of different things, and most of those things they don't even share with anybody else. We know men deal with, I got to work, I got to provide, I got to be a black man, or a white man. A lot of my clients, I have white men clients, but they deal with whatever they are faced with every day, being a father and trying to provide and, trying to keep a job and trying to deal with some of the vices that they're dealing with. But if I can take all those things that men may deal with and put it into one word, I think men struggle with their identity. I think that it's our identity that becomes the struggle, and I'll tell you why. I think at a very young age, we as boys, we were told our identity. We were given our identity. We were, you're too tall, you're too dark, you're too ugly, you're too smart, you're too. This is what you're going to be. And then of course, the old heads in the environment kind of perpetuates some of that stuff. This is, in order for you to be a man, you have to have X amount of women. Did you have sex yet? As being asked that question at 13, have you ever had sex yet? So all those narratives plays a part. And so because we've been given this narrative at a young age and this story about ourselves, we haven't had a space to find out who we are, because then we have to kind of go with the flow. We get older, we go to high school, for some go to college or the military or get a profession, and we have to put on this, I call it the Superman outfit. We have to put on the persona, but yet we still don't know who we are. And so I think the identity becomes our struggle, because then I see men who are struggling with intimacy, and struggling with pornography, and struggling with even our identity, whether they are bisexual or heterosexual. They struggle with that. They struggle with a lot of different things in their lives. And a big part of that is they really are not able to identify who they are. And so I think, to answer your question, I think that a big part of the struggle is our identity. And the challenge is that very, very, very few men have been pulled to the side and say, this is who you are. In African cultures, the rites of passage, they take the 13-year-old out and they bring the boys together and they go through a rites of passage. And then when they finish this rites of passage, they end it in saying, you are now a man. It's an African proverb that says, it takes a man to tell a man that he's a man. And so their identity is now being formed and saying, yes, I am a man. And a man being able to say, no, you don't need 4 or 5 different women. No, you don't need to smoke that weed. No, you don't have to smoke that cigarette. You don't have to have that kind of relationship. So I think that the struggle is a big part of it, is a man's identity.
We were talking about struggles earlier, and that come from trauma or pain. And I've been actually listening to a lot of Dr. Gabriel Mate, and his suggestion is that all addiction comes from pain. All addiction comes from trauma. And often these struggles can sometimes push men more towards addictions or negative habits. Can you take us through the thought process and reality of someone who has developed an addiction?
I think that there's probably two components to the role of addiction. One, I think, is genetics, and the other one, I think, is environmental. So meaning genetics is that a parent, a husband and wife, or male, female, they have sex, and someone is addicted to a drug. The chances of that child becoming addicted to the drug are high, such as fetal alcohol syndrome. Such as, I hate to use the term crack babies, but that's the term that's used when a parent is on crack. So some of that is genetic. Some of that comes through the bloodline, and they can't shake it. That's why the hospital is full of babies who are addicted to drugs. And so I think that's one reason that the addiction plays a role in addiction is genetics. The other one is environmental. I think outside influences play a big part into that. It's like addictions is like an individualized journey, because one addiction may not be for the other. So my brother and I, we smoked weed growing up. Okay. And we did it for a lot of different reasons. It was the thing to do, it was the environment. Hey, that's, projects, that's what we do, 15, 16 years old. And then one day he brought to me cocaine. Now I looked at that and I said, "Oh, heck to the no." I use another word. I don't know if this podcast is for mature audiences, but I said, "Heck no." Yeah. And so he did it, and he has been challenges or had challenges with drugs ever since then, because that very moment it hit his system, and the dopamine is the feeling that, the transmitters in your body. I'm not going too deep with all that stuff, but it's a good feeling. The drugs hit your body, so it kind of hits the dopamine and kind of confuses that, and so now you're addicted to not the dopamine but the drug. So, so I think part of it is the environmental part of it that may attribute to that, and some of it is mental health. So it's a broad kind of journey to go on, but the reality is that addictions, it's an individualized situation. I drank alcohol, but I wasn't addicted to alcohol. I watched porn, but I was addicted to porn.
Wow. Wow. So you had separate things, but you gravitated to something else.
And some of that may be based on a trauma. And I think you mentioned in that aspect, some of it is from a trauma, because I was traumatized and I was looking for the need of approval and acceptance and affirmation, and I didn't get it. And so, and rejection was part of my life back then, dating women and that kind of stuff, rejection. And so porn was my pacifier. So when I felt down, when I felt depressed, when I felt lonely, when I felt unsure about my identity, guess what made me feel good? It was the porn.
It was the pick-me-up.
It was because it was safe. I wasn't getting any diseases from it, but yet it became addictive, and so I became drawn to it. So, so that's my thought about the addictions and the development of addictions.
Wow, man. So you talked about how you were talking about dopamine and cocaine, and how someone can be addicted to cocaine and not necessarily to dopamine. What makes habits like this, or any habit really, so hard to break? Habits that we want to break. It could be vaping, it could be smoking, pornography, like you mentioned, anything. What makes them so difficult to break? And I guess also another question is, what makes good habits so hard to develop as well? It's really a two sides of the same coin.
I think that, again, there's a lot of factors, because if it's genetic, then it's hard to break that habit. It's going to require some therapy, maybe some chemical assistance in breaking that. But for the most part, I think it's the acknowledgement that I do have an addiction. It's being able to say, you know what, this behavior is more than just a behavior. this behavior now is turning to an addiction. This behavior is now impacting me, my employment, my relationships with interpersonal relationships. People are starting to say that are close to me, not other people, people who are close. They're saying, that smoking is really, I'm concerned,
Yeah,
and so when you get the responses from other people and they're concerned and they're impacting you, then I think at some point it's hard to be able to look in the mirror and say, I have an addiction. It's hard to do that because you're facing something that's been so pleasurable and so good to you. So that's I think that's the first challenge, is to be able to acknowledge and say that I have an addiction, and being honest and looking at how is it impacting other people. Now to develop, was it good habits you say, or good addictions?
Yeah. Why are they? Habits are so hard. I started over the summer doing flossing twice a day. That was the hardest thing I possibly have ever done, to remember. And I just eventually had to tape the floss to my toothbrush. And that started working, But why? Yeah, why are they so difficult to develop?
That's interesting. I have to learn that one too.
Yeah.
I think like I say, always find out the whys. Why is it? And some of it is temperaments. We have 4 temperaments, and there's my temperament is, I'm an introvert extrovert. So my introvert temperament is prone to procrastinate.
Right up my alley, man.
It's just in my DNA, it's my nature. So, and I want to read the Bible every day. I want to floss my teeth every day because I know it's important that I would do that. But I'm like, the time I get to that bathroom, brush my teeth, I'm like, whatever, I'm good. So part of that is our temperament, and I think it's important to know your temperament, strengths and weaknesses. And there's some temperaments, the melancholy temperament, they'll floss that thing every day.
Oh yeah,
because that's how it is. There's a routine. So I think part of that is temperament driven. I think as far as I think part of it is if we don't see the bigger picture and feel the bigger picture, then it's hard for us to go to that bigger picture. So flossing is one thing because it's hygiene. We're not going to really die from that process. Yeah. It's important. When you get my age, you want to make sure you do it because your teeth will fall out. So keep on flossing. Keep on. That's a good thing to do. Oh, yeah. You don't want to deal with that one. But I think that other things that we see that are habits that we want to, the good traits, the good behaviors that we want to create, I think we have to put some things in place, such as accountability. Because sometimes, it's like a workout. I want to work out and work out and lose X amount of weight. Then some people get a trainer, and they get a trainer and they lose. So, you have to put some mechanisms in place to obtain that outcome that you're looking to have. So, and there's some good habits that we can do on cruise controls, but I think we have to figure out what is the outcome that we want to desire and what kind of support that we need to get to that place.
Wow. Well, as we're wrapping up here, just imagine if someone was vaping, smoking, any type of negative habit, but they're looking to quit. They're looking to stop, but they don't know where to start. What would your advice be to that person? At first, of course, you said start with looking in the mirror and accepting that this is a bad habit or an addiction. What do we do with that and beyond that?
I think it's important to identify if the person's able to do it. Of course, we're talking about a big age range here. Vaping starts at a very young age now, all the way up until, adulthood. But I think at some point that person should be able to pause. And I'm just saying, when I say pause, just sit in a space without any distractions. A park, in your room, no vaping. Just sit there for a minute and say to yourself, what are the results of me doing this? Yes, feel good. It relaxes me, all those other answers that someone may give. but what are the negative results that were given? If a person can sit and ask themselves that question and then come up with that answer, that will be the beginning stages of at least putting into their mind, yeah, this right here is not good because it's impacting my health.
Yeah.
I think that's a start, and everybody can't do that. It's like I give therapy and I give these assignments for people to do, and some do it, but there's some who have very much struggles. And then the second thing I would suggest, if you find yourself in that place where, okay, I'm able to do that, but am I able to reach out to someone and say, you know what? Can you help me with this? That's all. Find someone to say, I know you know I vape or smoke. I know you know that, but I just have a revelation that is impacting me, and can you help me with this? And find someone who's actually able to help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that was the video. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thank you, Mr. McCollum, for an awesome conversation. If you liked today's video, like the video, and don't forget to fill out the Google form for some free merch in the description below. Thanks, and have a good one.